Hello and welcome back to Wyoming Watch from the Wyoming Tribune Eagle. I'm Noah Zahn, your state government reporter here. This week, I'm sharing a conversation that I had with our sports editor, Jeremiah Johnke. We spoke about some of the top stories you'll be keeping an eye on as the high school sports fall season kicks off. This includes things like whether a new football coach will be able to turn things around at Cheyenne South High School, and if Cheyenne Central High School can continue its cross-country dominance. Here's that conversation now. Now I'm here with Jeremiah Johnke, our WyoSports Editor. Thank you for joining us on the podcast this week. It's been a little over a year since the last time you were on here. Is that correct?
Yeah, last time I was on, we recapped the Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo.
Yeah, and right now you're kind of in that lull in between Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo sports coverage and this upcoming fall sports, and you even had state baseball, which you normally don't cover, but it was in Cheyenne, so you did this year. And so we're here to talk today about, I guess, a preview of this fall sports season coming up. So I guess you've got some top issues that you want to talk about. What comes to mind as the top things you're looking forward to covering this season?
Yeah, these are just some of the things that stand out to me as the things I'm maybe just kind of following a little more closely as the fall sports season gets going. And, you know, for those listeners that don't know, the fall sports season in Wyoming includes golf, girls swimming and diving, cross country, tennis, football, volleyball, and I feel like I'm forgetting one. So forgive me if I have to double back to that. But you know, the things that I'm kind of keeping an eye on for the fall sports season is, you know, Cheyenne East football has been 3-time state runners-up to Sheridan, and you know they're in a similar situation to what they were last year, where graduation hit that roster hard, and you lost a lot of contributors. But I think they have a few more back this year than they did last year, and what they've got going into some of those other positions is they have kids that have come up through the program from freshman, sophomore, JV level, and they've been able to just kind of bring those kids along slowly. And they've been able to play, you know, at their age group and just kind of prepare for this, you know, the bigger varsity competition. And, you know, it was something last year I really expected, you know, a pretty good drop-off with Cheyenne East football because of all they lost. And there was no drop-off. You know, they were, you know, maybe not just as good as they were the year before, but they still found a way to get to the state championship game and you know, be really competitive in the games that they did lose. And so, you know, with Chad Goff, who's in his 20th season as the head coach there, you know, I have no reason to doubt, you know, that staff that's had continuity that, you know, they won't have the Thunderbirds. I wouldn't be surprised if the Thunderbirds are back in the state championship game or, you know, at the very least back in the state semifinals. You know, kind of staying on the football realm, you know, Cheyenne South has a new football coach in Stephen Fernandez, and it's, you know, unfortunately South is enduring the state's longest losing streak right now, and, you know, coincidentally they host Sheridan on Friday and open the season against the team that has the state's longest winning streak. But, you know, South has struggled badly with numbers. You know, last year they had to forfeit a game at Campbell County because injuries had just decimated the varsity roster to the point where I think they had 17 kids for just the sophomores through seniors at practice that were available to practice on that Wednesday when they did announce that they were forfeiting that game. And, you know, the numbers are at a decent level. When I talked to Stephen Fernandez last week, they had 35 kids out, sophomores through seniors, and more than 20 freshmen out. And he's really, and his staff have really done gone to great lengths to try to really build enthusiasm for South football. You know, from the time that they could start working with kids, you know, in preparation for this season last spring, you know, they had a whole slew of 8th graders from Johnson Junior High consistently working with them, and they're trying to build it from the ground up. And, you know, they're trying to really just kind of, when they go to camps or when they go to practice, it's there's a lot more structure and discipline, right down to, you know, when you go to a practice, you're wearing black shorts and a white T-shirt and that sort of thing. Or when they were at camp and they were going from one location to the field, you know, they were walking 2 by 2 and that sort of thing. Or, you know, hey, you don't wear your cleats across the track or in our locker room. You know, we're going to respect our house and we're going to take our shoes off just like we would if we were at home and that sort of thing. And it's it's not going to be an overnight turnaround, and it's not going to be an easy turnaround for Cheyenne South football. But you can definitely tell that there's a different energy at their practices now when I've stopped by and talked to the kids and the coaches. So it's something that, for those kids at South High, for them to have lost, I think it's coming up on 40 games if it hasn't passed it already. You have seniors that have just never experienced a win, and for them to continue to come out week after week, I mean, I got nothing but the utmost respect for those kids.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of shift in energy that you're talking about, is that something that you've seen before at Cheyenne South? Because, like you said, last year they didn't have the numbers some of the times. And so have they had that energy shift before, and then it's kind of dwindled over time to get to where that position was? Or is this a different kind of feeling?
Yeah, this is a little bit different feeling. I think you see some of that every time there is a coaching change. And I want to say Stephen Fernandez is the fourth coach that South's had. It started out with Tracy Pugh, and then it was Dan Gallus and Eli Moody, and now Stephen Fernandez. And, there's always kind of, a fresh energy with the new coaching staff and that sort of thing. But, this attention to detail and doing all these little things, I think it's one of those things. All right, we're going to start with the small things, and eventually those are going to build into big things. And, just my son, for full disclosure, is a freshman at Cheyenne South, and he plays golf over there. And, dropping him off for strength and conditioning stuff over the summer, I always saw the football team out doing things, stuff that, and so, I mean, they had a commitment from both the coaches and the athletes, and there was a buy-in. So, whatever happens this season, good or bad, it's not going to be for a lack of trying on everybody's part. And it's one of those things, like I said, it's going to be a slow build in terms of just trying to right that ship. I mean, they're not turning around a speedboat like you would if you inherited a Central program or an East program where, they're going to the semifinals every year, or they're playoff contenders every year. This is a South program that, it's going to be like turning around a battleship. It's going to be a slow, steady process that's not going to happen overnight. And, I just, just seeing some of the comments on social media and stuff like that from parents of South football players, I think, right now there is a lot of buy-in and a lot of goodwill for that coaching staff. And, whether that continues, for those kids, I certainly hope it does, and I hope the good vibes continue. But, it's kind of one of those things where you never know what's going to happen once, you get a couple games into the season, and, who knows? I mean, a couple losses pile up, injuries pile up, and it's a difficult road over there at South football.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to ask about that is, it sounds like a similar situation to the high school I went to. We didn't win a single game the 4 years I was there. The program was not great, and a lot of the talent there would transfer to other schools to play for them. Has that been an issue with schools in this district where they'll maybe transfer to a school with a historically better team?
It's always a conversation piece, but historically I don't know that it tracks. I mean, you have a few standouts here and there that end up at one school or the other across town, but it's in a sport like football, one or two guys isn't going to make an enormous difference. You need teams full of guys in order to win games or to make the playoffs or go on a playoff run. And while you can't, I don't think there's any disputing the fact that they do lose some talent. I think one of the bigger issues is just with South, there are so many different things that come into play, socioeconomically. I've had coaches tell me that, and this is something I'm going to write about in my feature for Friday's paper. There's the Gary brothers, Colton and Carter Gary. They work summer jobs where they're pouring concrete for their grandfather's business. And, that's kind of what they have to do if they want some of the, as one coach told me, if you want new phones, new car, new shoes, that sort of thing, they have a higher percentage of those kids that have to work in order to get those things because the parents don't have the disposable income to supply those things for the kids as much as they have at some of the other schools. So you have a higher percentage of kids at South that they lose to jobs because they want those luxuries in life. And I had the coach that told me that, and I've had it echoed by others. They're saying, listen, we're not losing the kids we're losing, it doesn't mean we're going to be state championship contenders, but we're losing a high enough percentage of those kids that it is keeping us from being competitive. And then the other thing is, like you said, with being at a school where you lose all those games, you have kids choosing other sports or just to not even go out for the team because they look at it as, well, what's the point? And I think that they're gonna those are those things they have to overcome. That's part of turning that battleship around is just showing that there is momentum and things are headed in the right direction, and you build a little enthusiasm. And maybe some of those kids that were on the fence and chose to not come out, maybe now they come out because they see good things happening, or they hear from their peers that good things are happening and it's headed in the right direction. And then it just kind of snowballs eventually.
Yeah, I'll be interested to check that story out because that sounds like a similar situation. To reference my high school again, is kind of not in a great part of town, so I'm sure a lot of those similar difficulties. And so moving on to some of the other top issues that you'll be covering this fall, what else have you got?
Yeah, moving on to some other sports that aren't football. Cheyenne junior now, Maggie Matson is the reigning state champion in girls cross country for Class 4A. And what she's done at a regional level is, just really remarkable as well. She has continued that through indoor and outdoor track, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's got to be a heavy favorite to repeat. I'd be shocked if she doesn't, just because she's a remarkable runner, and she's finishing, several seconds, if not minutes ahead of her competition regularly. And so it's kind of remarkable to watch. But along those lines with girls cross country, Cheyenne Central is the defending state champions, and they have so many girls back that contributed to that state championship win last year. And they're all juniors pretty much. You have Sophia Rose, who was fifth, I believe, last year at state, and Adeline Racinas, who was in there in the top 10, if not near the top 10. But then, one big returner they have is Malia Adams Case, who, she finished, I believe, 16th, but it was such a crucial finish for Central because they beat Natrona County for the state championship by a single point. Well, the reason Malia Adams Case's finish was so important was because she finished one place ahead of a Natrona runner by just 0.4 of a second. So if you reverse those finishes, or she slides back even a little bit more, then you've got shared state championship, or you've got maybe Natrona finds a way to beat Central with how their other runners finished. And so it'll be interesting. I would be shocked if Maggie Matson and Cheyenne Central don't repeat as state champions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how long does that season play out, the state finals? When is that?
It's late September, if I remember correctly. And it's interesting enough, the teams will get a preview of the state course this weekend. The University of Wyoming hosts a meet out at Little America Golf Course here in Cheyenne, and they have a high school component to that. Well, that's where the state championship meet is going to be contested. And so now you've got teams that want to get a preview of that course that will come from, I think we saw Worland and Sheridan here, and those are teams that typically don't come down to Cheyenne for meets, especially Worland, being a Class 3A school far up in the northwestern side of the state, to come down to the southeast corner just to run a cross-country race. That typically doesn't happen, but they want to get a look at what that course looks like and familiarize themselves with it. So it deepens the high school field for that Wyoming invite, along with the Colorado teams that come up, because I think that when you have local meets in Cheyenne, you typically don't get those Colorado teams, but because they know that Wyoming invite is going to be a pretty sturdy field, they'll come out to that one as well and challenge themselves. And so it's we'll get a look at that state course and what the local kids look like in a challenging field right out of the gates.
Mm-hmm. You said the course is at Little America.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like in the golf course area, or
it is
somewhere? Okay.
It is in the golf course.
Yeah.
They really just kind of hold themselves to that. The golf course at Little America wraps around the resort itself, but there is a good chunk of it that is kind of west of the resort with the driving range and the first couple of holes. So they'll make a couple of laps around several of the holes to get that that 5 kilometer course in.
Okay.
The really other thing that I'm looking at is Cheyenne Central girls tennis. They've been on such a run of state championships, and they're loaded again. Looking at the results from the first couple of duels, because that sport has already started. You've got Haley Mathis-Breitkopf and Kaylin Smedley playing number 1 and number 2 singles respectively. Haley Mathis-Breitkopf she's the reigning state champ in number 1 singles, and she's also won 2 number 2 singles state championships, so she's going after her 4th. And they're loaded all the way down through the doubles team. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on Central girls tennis and seeing what they can do this year if they can repeat as state champs.
And how long has that program been this successful there? Is it kind of a newer thing with these talents there, or is it historically been a pretty good program?
They've really been on quite a run over the past 10 years of winning state championships. It was always historically one of the better programs in the state, but the run they're on right now is just it's really just kind of staggering, the amount of state championships that they've been able to rack up. And it's just kind of a credit to the junior program that has been built up in this city, where through Holiday Park and through Frontier Park Family Tennis Center in the winters, where they can play indoors, you have so many kids that are taking lessons, they're playing year round, and really just there's from East, Central, and South, there's just really a good community there of camaraderie. And for whatever reason, the majority of those kids live in the Central Triad, and you've got a roster just stocked with those kids that play year-round, and the results show that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's about all I think we had. Was there anything else concerning this upcoming season that you wanted to chat about?
No, those are the 4 things I'm really keeping an eye on this year. So I appreciate you having me and taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast. It's good to have you back. And if you want to follow along with those, you can check out WyoSports.net. That's the best place to find those. Yeah, thanks for coming on. And now here's Taylor Staples, our arts and entertainment reporter, to bring you a roundup of some upcoming events in Cheyenne and Laramie County this week.
Today, August 29th, there's an event at the library for people to network called the Cheyenne Young Professionals Kickoff from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Then, on Sunday, August 30th, there's a Touch a Truck event in the Cheyenne Frontier Days parking lot from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., as well as Day 2 of the Urban Sketching event at the Cheyenne Creativity Center. That will take place from 2 to 4 p.m. On Sunday, August 31st, there's the Sunday Makers Market in the Frontier Mall Southeast parking lot. This is the last Sunday to check it out. Monday, September 1st is Labor Day, so not much is happening, but on Tuesday, September 2nd, there's the monthly Teen Art of Creativity Club meeting from 4 to 5 p.m. And on Wednesday, September 3rd, there's chair yoga and poetry from 11 to 11:40 a.m. at the library, and meditation at the Cheyenne Botanic Gardens at noon. Finally, on Thursday, September 4th, there's a teen writing club event at the library, as well as a Waterwise landscaping chat with a specialist from the Laramie County Conservation District from 6 to 7:30 p.m., also at the library. For more events, go to wyomingnews.com/calendar.
And before we close out today, here's a recap of some of our top stories and headlines from the past week. When former State Senator Darren Smith officially resigned after 7 months in office to take on his new role as interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Wyoming, a replacement needed to be selected. On Monday evening, the Wyoming Republican Party hosted an event in Guernsey that allowed party committee members to cast their votes for who they want to see fill Smith's vacancy. 3 candidates were selected: Jeff Barnes, Roy Burt, and Taft Love. A final candidate will be selected by county commissioners today. The Environmental Protection Agency approved Wyoming's request for primacy over its coal ash programs. The EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin was in Cheyenne Thursday to sign the approval, and it will go into effect after a 60-day public comment period. A Cheyenne elementary school teacher charged with 16 felony counts of sexual abuse of minors pleaded not guilty to all charges Thursday. Brian Rell, a 55-year-old 5th grade teacher, was arrested July 28th on 9 counts of second-degree sexual abuse of a minor and 7 counts of third-degree sexual abuse of a minor. After thorough inspection of nearly 8,000 M18 modular handguns, Air Force Global Strike Command has lifted its pause on use of the weapons, effective Monday. This includes personnel at Cheyenne's F.E. Warren Air Force Base. The Air Force conducted a comprehensive investigation of its Sig Sauer M18 modular handgun systems following a directed pause on July 21st. And finally, Bonsai Books has filled the space in that bright yellow building on Quincy Road for nearly 2 years. Being Cheyenne's only locally owned bookstore, the space has served as a community space for book and coffee lovers alike. But due to many outside factors, the independent bookstore will soon permanently close. That's all for this week's episode of Wyoming Watch. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to check back next Friday for more.